there are a few things that you can do that you can screw up that it's just not a big deal. A deal going the wrong way is not going to ruin your life or bankrupt you, typically, depending on the size. But a bad partnership can fuck you over.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Big Picture Blueprint. Today, we're going to talk a bit about partnerships, the good, the bad, how to approach this and enter into successful partnerships. And much of our insights going to come from us having done the opposite. So you'll hear a lot about bad partnerships so that hopefully you don't have to make the same mistakes that we have. Uh, in the meantime, Mason, how's it going?
In general, things are good. There's certain issues in business that have come, and stemmed from, different issues that we're going to talk about today. But in general, I mean, things are great. We're developing a bunch of properties, selling a ton of stuff. It's 80 degrees. We're recording this March 20th, and 80 degrees in Colorado Springs. So spring is here. I got one day on the mountain this year. It was the worst ski season of all time. But I think it bodes well for the land market, that things are heating up. So excited for this conversation, and we'll try to make it as tangible as possible and not just vent and, express frustration.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just going to be about partnerships that have gone wrong. There's going to be talk of partnerships that went right and what we did differently in those. Obviously, Mason and I still do business together, and that's gone great. I have, a partner I've been doing business with since 2019. And so there's been successes as well, but I think it's easier to learn from the failures. So, Mason, I know you have a lot to say on this. You want to kind of kick it off with some of the experiences you've had?
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, Dan brought it up. Dan's one of the few people on the planet that I'll do business with, from a partnership standpoint. And I think whenever we are defining what we're talking about here, we're talking about business partnerships. We're not talking about creating like a GP LP kind of scenario of like structuring entities or anything like that. We're talking about we're going into business. We could consolidate it to like a 50-50 type partnership. Whether the actual split is that, but bringing in one or two people in to do some sort of business venture or project. I think where it really starts to go right or go wrong is the actual definition of what the expectations of the individual roles are. Where, Dan and I have done, a good amount of business together, and we've been pretty successful doing business together, but our roles are almost the exact same in everything that we've done. It's just like, all right, I'm tired today, you do it, or I'm traveling or whatever it might be. I think whenever you're looking to create an actual successful partnership, I think if you are true 50-50 partners, equal capital contributions, equal time, equal labor, you need to dive deep into who that person is before jumping into it. And then put all of those responsibilities on paper. Because I think when you're approaching a partnership like this 50-50, like equal workload, equal capital contribution, you need to be very comfortable with that person, which means opening up their books, like having them send, tax returns or P&Ls, having them like actually show you what's under the hood. Because I think in, you know, humanity in general, there's so much ego at play, and with so many online personalities, like you think all these people are making all this money and they're just not. And that can really move things along in the wrong direction. But I'll pause there for a second.
Yeah, I think that's all spot on. I mean, I would, these can be awkward conversations, and I don't know that you'll always get to the point of necessarily seeing their financials, but a good way to test it. I like to test the waters with a one deal partnership before you actually get married, right? So Mason's talking about maybe you're starting an actual LLC or corporation together, going into business in the long term. Well, how do you test it? See how you work together, just like you would date someone before marrying them. I think you should do that with business partnerships, and one-off deals are a great way to do that. I think I funded one for you, and then we did some one-off sort of transactions before actually starting any sort of entity together or even starting this podcast together. And so I think that'll be telling how it goes on those deals. And ideally, I mean, you never want a deal to go badly, but you want to see how the other person handles and how you too handle any sort of, loss or just a deal that didn't go well or some sort of conflict or problem, right? If you do a few deals with someone and they're all home runs, that doesn't really give you that much insight. You need to see or know how they handle the hard, stressful situations as well.
Absolutely. When I mean, I think you have to make the assumption that the deal's not going to go perfect. So how the partner responds is much more important than the actual deal itself, where, the deal, you had extra cash lying around, you funded a deal for me right whenever we got to know each other, or not right away, but 6 months or a year later. And it took longer to sell than either of us wanted. And regardless of what the contract said, I said, dude, like, this is taking longer. Here, let's up your percentage split by 15% to get more of the deal because it's taking longer than we expected. And I could have abided by the contract and been like, dude, sorry, whatever. Um, and you still made money on it. I still made money on it. Everyone won, and it sold eventually. And I think that right there is kind of the attitude that you want with a partner of, hey, the deal's not going this well, so let me make sure I'm contributing more of my time because I'm the one that, structured it, or, whatever it might be if it's on a deal by deal basis. But it's the people that I think, in terms of red flags, it's the people that nickel and dime you, are the type of people that you don't necessarily want to do business with, where like, and it can be telling in a lot of different ways of, who cares if you split the check at dinner or something like that, or, you buy coffee or something like that. And if the person's like, hey, can you Venmo me for the coffee that I bought you? Um, those are the kind of people that you want to be wary of, because not that you're looking for someone that's just going to be so generous that they like give away all their money or anything like that, or spend it super rashly. But I think the people that are going to nickel and dime over absolutely everything, usually that translates into their business in a way that, can be kind of hairy. Or the person that never pays for anything, um, it is also a person you want to be wary of. But I think you have to make the assumption whenever going into a partnership, just like Dan said, of like, hey, do a test deal. You want to date before you get married and see how they respond every step of the way for that. If they're, um, I think, being too meticulous about stuff they shouldn't be meticulous about, and too, flipping about stuff that they should not be flipping about, is another red flag there.
Yeah, I like what you mentioned about them going, you went out of your way to give me more on a deal that you weren't really required to. And I remember saying, no, 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 it's fine several times. And you insisted. So eventually I said, okay, fine. I'm not gonna say no more than several times. And that's kind of the attitude you want to have, you want to see in a partner, in my opinion, where they're concerned about you doing well as well as themselves, and are more of you know, more giving and generous within the partnership itself. Like that's more setting you up for a long-term success. And you just made me think of one of the lenders I've used over and over and over again for years. And I had a deal that wasn't going very well last year. I had made a mistake on it, and so I just paid him off. I cashed him out. I gave him his interest, and I could have let that drag out, and I could have just said, "Oh, hey, I mean, it just is what it is. I don't have to pay you back yet." Blah blah blah. But it's just right. I want to keep that relationship good, although we're not directly in business together. He keeps funding deals, so we kind of are. And so that's what you should look for in a partner. And so to make this more tactical, where do you find this? Well, you want to get an idea of who they've been working with. Have they been working with the same people for a long time? A huge green flag right away is when someone says, "Oh yeah, I have X and X, X venture, and I've been partners with them for 12 years or 20 years." Right? That's a great sign. If you find people who have worked with the same lenders and the same realtors and the same partners for a long time, that's just a good sign that they might be a good business partner as well. Whereas when I think of some of the problem people I've had, and actually some of the problem girls I've dated, there was a lot of short-term relationships. And where are the long-term friends, or where are the long-term, the bankers you've been using, the subcontractors you've been using? You say you've been in business for 2 decades or whatever, and you don't see evidence of that in the length of relationships they have, and that's a big red flag. So I really try and look at people's relationships, honestly, personal too. We can get into that, but I want to see they've had the same partner for years. They've used the same contractors. I mean, there's always going to be some problems, right? There's some contractors I don't use, but I still talk to them. I don't have any burned bridges. And I think that's something you should look for in a partner too.
Yeah. No, and I think that's something nice about working with you, Dan, in the past is there's there's no chaos in your life. And and you think about life and it's always flowing and ebbing and there's so many ups and downs and there's so many chaotic things that happen whenever you're a human. But whenever you see very minimal chaos in someone's life, um, that's a really attractive sign. But if you're like, dude, they've been arrested, they've been divorced 2 or 3 times, like they're complaining about their kids or their partner, like the way they talk about other people, um, or create like generalizations about humans that are just like not true. It's such a turnoff from a business partner standpoint, and just getting to like see, beyond personal relationships and these business relationships, these like stakeholder essentially relationships where, you know, I I went into Chase yesterday to get something notarized from Natalie and, she asks about you. And so like you and I have the same bankers and same, notary and same, staff that we've both worked with. And going into restaurants and being like, oh, this guy gets recognized where he goes. And, he's like a member of the community. He's involved, with different people and his personal relationships are good. Like I think, you know, Dan, you had a girlfriend right when we met, and then you guys broke up shortly after we met, which was a little suspicious, because we were hanging out so much. But I think, from there, I saw in here personal relationships always, being very stable. You have the same group of friends that you've had for a long time. You work with the same business people, and I think that's an attractive sign. And then, uh, within business operations too, especially if you're working with someone that's been around for a while and has employees, and if you see they constantly have employee turnover, and I don't mean that in like a sales position. Sales, like you're going to expect a certain amount of turnover whenever you have salespeople working for you, especially in a small business. But if you have like an executive assistant, like an in-person, like executive assistant or accountants or different people that are constantly turning over in your business, you need to look at yourself or look at the business partner that has these turnover challenges, um, and figure out what's going on. Because some people I know have gone through like 5 or 6 admin staff in like a 3-year period of time. And that right there, I mean, an EA is someone that is a very long-term position, typically, whenever you are like a true on salary, staff position. So I think employee turnover is another red flag that you need to look at whenever you're going into partnership with someone.
Yeah, I agree fully. This is something that's top of mind for me because I have the new venture that I've told you about, and obviously that's a big partnership, like a many many multi seven figure partnership sort of deal, and something that has given me a ton of confidence is having met a bunch of his employees that speak very highly of him. They're really excited about their job. Partners, bankers he's worked with, all of that has shown, like you said, the opposite of chaos in this case, stability, consistency, reliability. People speak highly of him everywhere I go. Um, and thinking of some of the failed partnerships I've had, I think of someone I was going to do a bunch of new construction with who I knew as a friend first, who seemed like quite the operator, and he's really smart, but he was always surrounded by chaos, as you said. And I should have noticed that earlier. I think if I had to sum it up in one word that's somewhat abstract, that's probably what I would use. You're the same way as me in that you're very stable, you're consistent, your personal life's in order, and that's a good sign in someone that you want to be a partner with, as opposed to the opposite. So that you want to look at too. And I don't think I'm overstating how important the personal relationships are. I mean, look, if someone doesn't have a stable home life, that's gonna affect your ability to have an effective business partnership. Like you said, I don't want to partner with someone that's in a miserable relationship and has trouble at home and not happy with their marriage and kids. That doesn't translate well into effective business, a business partner.
No, no, it doesn't. And I think a good rule to think about it, and if you drink, which, if people drink to excess all the time, that's probably a red flag too. But like, if you're down for a beer, could you get 2 beers with this person? Because 1 beer usually is like, and I say this for people that aren't lightweights like Dan, who has 1 beer and then he's drunk. But like, um, could you sit down for a conversation that's a 2 or 3 beer conversation with them? And by the second or third beer, it's not going to turn into talking crap about their spouse or their children or, all of these other red flags. And I think whenever you're looking at that, you hear this and you might be like, well, maybe they're just going through a tough time or something like that. But it's right there where if you have to be in a defensive state of mind when talking about your business partner of like, ooh, you went into business with Mason? Like, why? It's like, no, dude, like, I know he had these couple deals go bad or, this, that, or the other thing, but he's actually a really great guy or something like that. If you have to defend your business partner because of the reputation that they're creating in the community, then that's just one of those chaotic elements that you're not going to want to deal with in the long term. And I think with that, um, I say this as, Dan and I have been interviewed on hundreds of podcasts. We've released, got 150, 160 episodes of the Big Picture Blueprint at this point in time. We post about stuff online and everything like that, but I don't think either of us would consider ourselves social media personalities or like gurus or, coaches. And, we've both done coaching. And so, I recognize there's a little bit of hypocrisy here, but like, I think in general, a red flag for me is the people that are way too education forward in their business. Like if you are not seeing, if they have an online presence on social media and a majority of the content that they're coming out with is about promoting educational products rather than the actual business and deals that they're doing, I think that's a red flag going into a partnership because it shows that there's way too much ego at play, and that if a majority of their time that you see is focused on promoting an education, that means a majority of the money that they have coming in is coming from education. And that's a business that I think is continuing to decline. I think there's far less educators that are doing well because there's so much information available for free, or a chat GPT or Claude or Gemini subscription that could take all of the content that exists on the internet and create a coaching program that's better than anything out there for you for, $10 a month. So I'll pause there for just a moment before I keep ranting.
I'm probably even more cynical about that than you are at this point. I think I said this to someone I was talking to recently. If you created a Venn diagram and you have one circle of people with, large scale, let's just say land businesses, and then another Venn diagram of people who sell coaching products, the overlap is very, very minimal. And yeah, I agree fully where the longer I'm in business and the more legitimate people I meet, and then also the more influencers I get to know, I find that more of the latter are not doing what they say they're doing. And then the former almost never even have social media. I mean, if you're a millennial, you're going to at least have a social media profile, but a lot of them, they just aren't posting. It's just not like I'm the busiest I've ever been right now with business. And I think I've posted like twice this year. It's not to say that it's impossible to do both. I know a few people we've had on this show have coaching businesses and are also serious operators doing a lot of business. So there's exceptions, but generally speaking, that's just something to watch out for.
And I think it boils down a lot of times to the personality rather than the educators. Of like we've had some people that have some big coaching businesses that are freaking like coaching is a new service line for them, where they're making, it's supplementing a lot of their investing, uh, or it's just, fun money or something like that. So we're not just, shit talking, real estate coaches and stuff like that, but we're saying be wary of them, because if education is their primary method of generating income, and you are expecting them to be a 50-50 partner in what amounts to be an operational focused deal or, funding deal, funding related deal, it means they might run out of money, because as soon as, they appeal to enough people and they, get as many coaching clients as they can, they might not bring any more income in. So I think it's something to just be very wary of. And the most terrifying part of it in my mind is ego. Whenever you see people that are your partners with on deals, posting a lot on social media about how much money they're making and then they don't actually have the money. It's concerning because then it's what else is not true about them. And it starts opening up a can of worms that you don't necessarily want to see with any business partners that you're doing business with. And in general, the operators that you and I work with, Dan, that you'll never see on social media, you'll never see on a podcast, their combined net worth is in the billions. So it's
Mm.
um, you know, it, they're too busy to be doing it. So
It's so funny. I know we're on a little bit of a tangent, but it's all applicable to much of what we talk about all the time. The person I'm working with now and for the last year on some of these larger deals constantly tells me, and I've told you this, Mason, of what are you doing? Why are you giving away so much free information on the podcast? Why are you creating your own competition? Um, and that's how a lot of the people that are actually doing a lot of business think. I've found that so many of the people that oh, there's a word that they'd always use on the stupid podcast. Now I can't think of it. But the people who are just freely talking, giving all insight into market that they're in and everything like specific that they're doing, it's because they're not doing it anymore. They're making their money with coaching. They did something in that place at some point, maybe once, and now it's not actually an active business for us.
no, that's so funny because you'll see them bring up, the same deals unless it's your first deal. You shouldn't necessarily, or it's a horror story. If you're like bringing up the double your money deal that you did in Costilla County, Colorado in 2020, still it's 2026, guys. Like, stop talking about it. Like, the market's shifted, the market's changed. Um, it means they haven't, just like Dan said, they haven't done any deals. And I do think, yeah, we probably give away too many secrets of the trade, on this show. But we do hope it's beneficial. And I know we've helped people. And it's led to really cool conversations and it's led to, investors. I mean, that's why Dan and I do this podcast, is because we've created a digital footprint for us that people can say, hey, if you want to figure out, I've got thousands of hours of my ramblings and Dan's ramblings so you can go figure out who we are. And, beyond that, it's like a digital diary for my future children of, hey, if you want to see what Dad was up to from 2023 till, whenever Dan and I, finish this show, if we ever do, you can go, see this, business diary essentially of Dad. But like next week, I'm getting I have a conversation with an investor that found me online. And we're looking at like a 7-figure deal together that he's like, hey, I'm super liquid. I want to get into land. You came referred to me and, I found you online. And so there can be pros and cons. So we're not trying to like create dogmatic thinking of like, if these people are online and social media in any aspect, don't do business with them. I think it's just something to be wary because usually there's more ego and potentially there's, shades of gray that end up being pretty bad whenever you actually, open up the kimono and see what's going on underneath.
Yeah. So getting back to the core point in the whole podcast of how to vet partners, how to decide who to partner with and who to run away from, I still think the one-off deals to start is one of the best things we could possibly tell you because you learn a lot from that. But another thought is, depending on what sort of deal you're doing, if you can involve a banker, that really helps, right? Because you can't fake it. If you do happen to run into someone who is not doing what they say, maybe they just make money selling courses and they don't have experience in the business, and you're going into a partnership with them. If they don't have any money, like Mason has run into, and I have a few times as well, that's going to come out when you have to send your financials to the bank. And so ideally, if you can involve a bank in some way, shape, or form, that's great. For me, I had a banker tell me about a partner I'm doing business with of, hey, you should work with this guy. And that was really reassuring because I don't have to say more. That's obvious, and so I think that that's helpful where, you can BS and hide a lot until the banker requests all your financials, right? And so that's helpful too. I mean, I guess that's a little potentially not applicable depending on what sort of deal you're doing, but it is helpful to have at least some sort of lender because even if it's a private lender that's funding something for you guys or seeding your business, they're probably going to want to see some evidence of you having money and a track record of making money.
Yeah, and I think with the banking, it's such a good point because whenever there is a banker involved, it's typically going to be a longer term relationship rather than a quick deal. And with a majority of the listeners to the show, a quick deal is, it's probably a simple land flip, a simple subdivide. Maybe it's a house flip or an apartment flip or something like that, where you're looking at, a 3 month to 2 year kind of timeline as versus like buying and holding or building a rental property that you're going to end up holding for, 5 to 30 years or something like that, where those people with the long term business relationships, or we had Jake Grossweiler on the show who runs a GC company, and like some of these, trade businesses that you are going to bring financial partners into, uh, those long-term relationships, yeah, you do really have to open things up and be very, very transparent, because if you or your partner doesn't want to be transparent with the other person, what does that say? Like, what are you trying to hide, or what are they trying to hide? Is it because they have such a large social media presence saying that they make millions of dollars a year and they actually make 40 grand a year? Or is it something else? Something potentially more nefarious. And it's just, the reason we're making this episode, and we don't have any notes, as you guys can tell, because we're kind of going all over the place, um, is because there are a few things that you can do that you can screw up that it's just not a big deal. And a deal going the wrong way is not going to ruin your life or bankrupt you, typically, depending on the size. But a bad partnership can fuck you over so, like, in the long term, to ways that you can't imagine. And that's a bad, romantic partner. Divorces I have seen ruin plenty of businesses. That is bad, friendship. But a bad business partner, where if you have to worry about your business partner being like, dude, I don't know what their personal financial statement is, and I don't know if they're borrowing against this property or using it as collateral in other deals that they might have. If you have any concerns about that, like, that's the kind of stuff that can absolutely ruin you financially. And then you have to deal with lawyers and legal costs and lawsuits and all sorts of stuff that can actually ruin you. So that's why we're taking the time to make this episode and trying to, based on our own experience, talk about, different things that have been successful in business relationships and things that have not gone well in business relationships. And I think, to boil it down to like one of the main points, is like, you have to have a clear definition of the roles. If you are true 50-50 partners, like, you need to make sure that person is like they're the best man in your wedding type of thing, of like, you need to know them very, very well and know that they are good for every single dollar and every single promised task that you're going to have. And then if it's a different type of relationship, one person's the operator, one person's the money guy, that needs to be outlined, and you need to make sure the money guy has money and the operator has experience. Yeah, otherwise you're screwed, guys.
There's a couple things you said that I had not mentioned that are so important, and you brought up lawyers and lawsuits. And in hindsight, one of the people I did business with that didn't work out, actually a couple of them, uh, in hindsight, it was so obvious. They had so many legal problems. And look, there's a point which, if you get to a big enough business, and maybe if you're doing a ton of new construction, or just doing a ton of subdivision, you're going to have occasional legal problems. It's just going to happen, right? Things will go wrong. But the person I'm thinking of now had so many lawsuits, and they seemed, some of them petty. And in hindsight, I'm like, why did I not notice that? That was so obvious. Um, so that's the first thought I had. Watch out for that. I mean, I know some older people, they're not billionaires, but they're doing pretty damn well. They're in the 8 or 9 figures, and they've only had a couple lawsuits their whole career, and there was very good reasons for the ones they had. So that's a big red flag. And the other thing you said is, if they're going to be the money guy, make sure they have the money. If they're going to be the operational guy, make sure that they are on top of what they're supposed to do. And I think about the partner I have that, like, half my rentals are just mine and then half of my own with the partner. And we started in 2019, late 2019. And what I like about him, and vice versa, is if he says he's going to do something, he always does it. And that seems so obvious, but if you're thinking about getting into bed with someone, right, into a partnership, test. This is a great test. Do they do everything they say when they say they're going to do it? Like, do you feel like you have to double check if they were going to do something, or if they said they do it, is that box checked in your mind because you know that they're that reliable? And if you're going to partner with them, it should be the latter, right? That they should never forget the things that are important, and they should always get them done. So
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, because if you have to constantly berate, the other person, we're not talking about like quick tasks or stuff that should be quick tasks. Like, Dan messaged me the other day of like, "Hey, can you put, some money into this account? We have to do this thing." And it's like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." Send it, the next morning or whatever because he texted me at night. And that's just such a non-issue. And there's no reason something, especially for a small dollar amount, it's like $250, um, should ever take any time. And you will notice of like these small tasks of like, "Hey, can you go get this notarized? Can you go do this? Can you go do that?" And if they're always too busy to do one of these things, it means their life is chaos. Because if you don't have the time to get a document notarized, especially in 2026, whenever I can go on whatever it is, notary.com and upload the document and within 5 minutes have someone sign it. Yeah, you have to pay $20 instead of going to the bank and doing it for free or whatever. But if you don't have the time to be able to do some, or your partner doesn't have the time to be able to do something like that, it means their life is so scattered and so disorganized that it is just the beginning. And it's the same thing with uh, people that I have try to work with me. I have wholesalers reach out to me every freaking day, and I'll tell them what I'm looking for, and it's a test. And most of them I'll never hear from. Some of them they will send me, a duplex for sale in, I don't know, Detroit or something like that, which is clearly not my buy box. And then every once in a while, people will send me stuff that's really close to what I'm looking for. And I think if you can create these little tests for your partner, and it doesn't matter if your partner is a billionaire or, the operator that you're going to be funding. And if they can't do these little tasks that we're talking about, be able to sever the relationship at the very beginning. And I think too, whenever you're going into a partnership with someone, get an attorney involved at the very beginning. Spend a little bit of money getting the operating agreement correct. Doing all the right things. And I say this, do as I say, not as I do. I don't think Dan and I have spent a lot of money on attorneys together, to no one's benefit. To help us out with stuff. But like if you're doing a serious partnership with someone, it's another way of like, if the bank's involved or an attorney's involved, like, yeah, you can lie to me all day, but you can't lie to them. And I think that's a really good test to make sure that you're creating something that's actually sustainable.
agreed. I have really one more thought on this. Just one more example. There was a contractor, two contractors, that came into town in Pueblo, I think 2020, and we didn't partner with them. But this is back when I was building a lot down there before Pueblo and Colorado really slowed down when interest rates hiked. And we had a whole bunch of projects in the pipeline with them. We had customers pre-sold on our lots, and these guys were going to build it. And it's a long story short, but the last time I heard about either of them, it was the Pueblo police calling me because they had stolen a bunch of money from someone, and nobody could find them. And in hindsight, they came from out of town, and so that kind of takes out the long-standing relationships with people right? They're new to town. Okay, they're not gonna know anybody here. But that's a red flag right away. If someone's moving and coming from out of town, I would not a red flag's strong. People move, right, and set up new businesses in a new place, but it's just another sign because 'cause I've known a couple people that came from out of town and, uh we're just like these guys. They left town for a reason, like, especially contractors, but this is true with just partners in general. Um, and I didn't pick up on that. I mean, when we started with them, I was, pretty new. This was 6 years ago. And then on top of that, they always wanted to hang out and talk about the projects and talk and talk and talk. Uh, and in hindsight, they always wanted lunch or dinner paid for them. I should have picked up on that, and they couldn't point to projects that they did. There was projects that someone else did in town, and because 'cause they'd been there maybe, I don't know, almost a year when I met them. Um, And in hindsight too, again, a lot of this wasn't clear to me at the time, but now I'm just kind of shaking my head because this just wasted so much time. Uh, in hindsight, it was more just projects they had like a little bit of involvement in, but they didn't actually GC. And so they were stretching. And it just reminds me of a couple other people I know that similarly are just totally untrustworthy. And I've watched them burn bridges for years because I'm aware of them in my market, but I'm not working with them. And it's these same patterns of behavior. It's like, again, we've said it 12 times, but are they working with the same people over and over? Are they changing company names? Have they had the same company name? Can you look up the company and see if they have reviews for years or at least the same entity and website for a long time? And if they are switching all the time, why are they switching all the time? Right? I just want to, anything you can do to find or see consistency with someone, I think is really important. So just another thought with those guys that ended up just totally wasting my time.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think, Google, pay for a background check with anyone that you're looking to do business with or partner, whether it's a one-off deal or, starting a huge company or, getting into bed with them. It's, take the time to do your due diligence, set things up correctly, make sure that the personalities match, make sure that the roles are defined clearly, and it'll protect you because, we want you guys to stay protected. But I think we've chatted about this long enough. We hope you guys found this useful. This is Mason McDonald and Dan Haberkas with the Big Picture Blueprint signing off.